We are going to get started in about 5 minutes. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to drop them in the chat. But otherwise, we will just go through kind of a basic study plan layout, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. Okay, so I mentioned this a minute ago, but for new people, the rough idea here is I'm going to go through a basic sort of study plan, some general tips pretty quickly, and then we'll have some time at the end for more specific questions. If you have questions, they might be answered by the slideshow. If not, feel free to hang around and we can have some discourse at the end. But I just wanted to do the basics for those of you who are new and you don't know where to start. At least I could give you that foundation first. So let me share this really quick. And if you have questions as we go, feel free to drop them in the chat. You also might be able to come off mute. You usually can't do that in the webinars, but you might be able to today. So if you struggle with that, let me know. Let me share this. I was slow to do that. Okay. All right, GMAT study plan. Let's look at kind of the foundation that I recommend people have. First up, don't wait until after you take the test to formulate your application plan. That is going to be hectic for no reason. If you do some research on schools, then you can kind of get an idea of a score range, and that might help you know how much you're going to have to prep. Research application deadlines and create an application calendar. I definitely recommend this because when I was doing applications, I finished my test and I ended up delaying applications for a while because it took me longer to prepare for the test than I thought it would. And sometimes those deadlines go away. So it's good to, even if you think you won't apply for a couple of years, write down what the deadlines are this year for the programs that you're interested in, for the rounds that you're interested in, because a lot of schools take that stuff down off their website. And so if you wait to get it, it is much harder to get. And then, of course, I love a spreadsheet. Put it in a spreadsheet so that you have it available and sortable for yourself. And especially when it comes to essays, I think everyone knows what the essays are going to be like. They are taxing, but they are mostly in your hands. Recommendations are different. You are depending on other people for recommendations. They're probably busy people, so give them way more time than you think they could possibly need. And of course, you can do consultations with admissions consultants. A lot of times you can do them free if you're not really sure where you should be aiming or what you're going to need. It does not hurt to reach out to people like that. If you are brand new, I recommend that you prep a little bit before you take a mock to get your baseline score. You don't want to take it cold because the GMAT is a little bit unusual. The structure is classic. The content is pretty varied. And if you go in cold, you might just be overwhelmed by the layout and the user interface in a way that negatively impacts your score. So prep a little bit, learn about the types of questions, and then go ahead and get your baseline. That shows you where you're starting. As far as setting a score goal, average scores at your target schools is a good way to look. A lot of them will do a range of all the class, and then they will also do a range of like the 80% to factor out outliers. Other aspects of your profile, the more unique and interesting it is, the less I think you have to worry about your score. And then baseline score and how much preparation you want to do, I think is a really big consideration. Because if you set a really high score goal, but you just actually do not want to do that, then It doesn't matter how high your goal is if it is unreasonable compared to the amount of effort and time that you actually have or want to put into prepping for the GMAT. There are two phases: learning phase, practice test phase. So you're going to take your first baseline test, and then you are learning about what's on the test. So you are not going to take another mock for a while, because you could take other mocks, but if you haven't learned about the different questions on the tests, all the question types, all the topics, then your mocks are going to be depressed. Your scores aren't going to be based on you having already refreshed yourself on everything that the test covers, because you haven't. And so if you still have studying to do, you just have to wait. This can be challenging because you want feedback on how you're coming along, and there's not as much OG feedback when you're in the learning phase. It's the longest phase with the least feedback, so that can be challenging. But hang in there, focus on learning topics. Don't worry about too much. Don't worry too much about timing during the learning phase, because that is really honed in the practice test phase. And a lot of timing issues kind of work themselves out the more that you learn and the more that you practice the questions. And then when you get to practice tests, your foundations are there and you're just honing how you apply things in a test-like setting. Master one topic at a time. It is helpful to start with more basic topics and work your way up to more advanced topics, because usually the topics build on each other. For each topic, it's good to learn concepts and strategies involved in the topic first. You can, of course, just go straight into practice questions. And I think that you can learn things that way. I just don't think it's going to be the most efficient for many things. So if you already know a lot about some topic and you just want to brush up on how the test assesses your knowledge of that topic, go for the practice questions. But if you don't know anything about a topic, brush up a little bit on the concepts, and then when you are doing the practice questions, you'll be able to kind of see how they interrelate. Practice untimed. There are two things involved in doing well on the GMAT. One, the timing. Two, the accuracy. If you start practicing with timing limits in mind, it's very hard to get to the accuracy part, because you hit 2 minutes on a question and you just guess and move on. You don't train yourself to like push through that last little bit and really figure out the difference between the last two answers, or really make some connection, or really try to go back and figure out where your formula messed up. The timing limits let you off the hook a little bit early on, and so they can impede developing super high accuracy. If you develop your accuracy first, it's easier to cut your time down at the end. Data insights questions are quant and verbal based. So usually, at least in the TTP course, we recommend you work on data sufficiency alongside quant. It's kind of folded in there. There are some verbal criteria-based data sufficiency questions, but most of them are quant-based. Keep topics fresh in your mind. There's a lot of topics. You can only keep so many fresh in your mind at once, but you do want to fold in periodic review. So you don't want to learn about something and then not look at it for 8 weeks or whatever, and then at the end you barely remember it, because that's not going to serve you. So periodic review helps you assess if you're improving on weak areas, if things are getting better, and it also keeps them top of mind so that you can see what areas are really weak areas and what areas are, oh, I didn't know how to do this the first time I ever did it ever, so I wasn't very good at it, but after a little bit of practice, I've got it down. Don't underestimate the importance of spaced repetition. So here's how I typically recommend spaced repetition. If you do a question and you miss it and you don't really understand what's going on, because some you will miss due to careless mistakes, and then you look through the solution and you're like, oh man, I misread this. Those are, you just have to read more carefully. That's the lesson there. For questions where you don't quite understand what's going on and you really have to spend some time, you didn't see the connection, you have to go through and see what was going on in the question, do so, review it, and then give yourself a little time to forget what you read in the solution, and then go back a week later and try it again and see if you do it better the second time. Because if you do, great, you learned. If you don't do so much better the second time, then that's still a point that you need to work on. So spaced repetition is your friend. You want to review things, and then you want to give yourself a little time to forget. And so you can go back and see if you really learned what you needed to learn, or if it was just fresh on your mind. Create your own flashcards. If you like flashcards, they are useful for a lot of things. They are great for formulas. They are great for questions that you tend to miss the trick on. That was a thing that I used them a lot for. So if there is a simple way to solve a question, if you think about it, but you tend to not think about it when you see that type of question, that's a great thing to put on a flashcard so that you can associate the visual of the question with, oh, this is the trick. This is how you solve this in 2 minutes instead of 10 minutes of like laborious calculations. And it says active quizzing is much more effective than writing notes. That is true. You want to try to engage with your notes as much as possible. You want to try to engage with the material and make it interesting, and that helps your brain sort of form the connections that you need to form. Tracking your errors, you've got a couple of options. TTP has an error tracker. There are some other ones out there, or you can make your own with just like a spreadsheet. You want to see the patterns in your errors. So the more time you spend figuring out why you're doing what you're doing, the more you can avoid doing that same thing in the future. Look for your patterns. The whole test is patterns. You will see that while there are a lot of ways for the questions to go, there is still only a finite number. And as you do more and more, you will start to notice that they tend to repeat. And you will start to notice that you tend to do the same things as well, so that you can be aware of it and you can stop making the same mistakes, cut down on your accuracy problems, determine what to address, look for your weaknesses, improve your performance efficiently. So the more you spend time on tracking your errors and being introspective, the more efficiently long-term you can improve your score. Later in your prep, start doing practice with mixed sets. Obviously, later in your prep, you're learning one thing at a time. So when you first start out, you don't have very mixed sets at all to practice on. But later, you can do mixes of quant and verbal and DI. We typically do the rest of like non-data sufficiency, data insights, stuff sort of at the end because it is so focused on both quant and verbal. So you won't really have that many mixed sets of DI other than some data sufficiency until at the end, because you need a good quant and verbal base first. But mixing things up helps you recall them from more of a medley in your mind and less of like a specific, oh, I was focusing on this. Obviously, the question is about this. And then you're in your practice test phase. You've got your foundation. You want to take, I recommend all 6 practice tests. I also recommend you don't want to take more than 1 or 2 a week. They are very taxing. They take a lot of energy to take, but they also take a lot of energy to review, like probably more than you're thinking than they will. So give yourself plenty of time between the practice tests to review, because that is really the final leg as far as identifying where you still have gaps. It is tedious, but it is so helpful. So if you do not want to do it, I understand, but I promise you it is very much worth the time. Always take your practice tests accurately timed. You don't want to be taking a bunch of breaks and then be like, why is my score so much lower when I couldn't pause every 3 questions? It basically goes without saying, but I just throw it in there. Analyze your results after each test. So you want to analyze your results as far as how you did on the sections, how your timing went. I also recommend analyzing how you feel about, oh, I was tired, an hour and a half in, I was really tired, because that sort of thing can help you structure how you do the sections better so that they kind of play to your energy ebbs and flows. And if your score is not increasing, there's always some reason that you can identify and address. Some reasons will be easier than others. Some will take a bit more time and introspection to see. But the plateau of scores, I think, is kind of a pervasive myth. Usually there's somewhere that you need to work on something, and it's really just a matter of figuring out where that specific place is for you. And then scheduling your GMAT. People love to schedule them before they are ready and hope that having the test date out there will motivate them. I do not recommend doing that because things can often take longer than you think they will, and you don't want to have the pressure of your test there looming over you while you try to cram in way more material than you realize there was. It adds extra stress. You do not need that. And it can take away from your total test attempts. I don't think most people burn through their total test attempts because you get quite a few lifetime attempts and quite a few each year. But if you are the type of person that just schedules your GMATs like one every Saturday for 5 consecutive weeks, please don't, because you will burn through your total test attempts. And then try to control for everything that you can. So when you are going to a test center, plan out your route, try to go there if it's convenient, obviously. Try to go there a couple of days before, like plan for traffic, plan for accidents, plan to have a pet sitter, all that sort of thing. If you're taking it at your house, try to do everything you can to make sure your internet's in good shape, you've got your room set up, you've got the right tools, that sort of thing. Because if you wait till the test day, there's a good chance that you will have overlooked something, and that's going to add stress that you don't need in your life. And then preparing for the GMAT may take longer than you expected. There is a very good chance it will. Expect some ups and downs. You are learning depending on where you're at in your life. It might have been a while since you had to learn stuff in this way. You might be out of practice studying. Prepare for some ups and downs. You will be better at some things than others. That is not a character failing. You just have to learn to kind of ride the waves of stress and trust the process and motivate yourself by noticing how you are improving. It's good to mark your success as you go so that you can see those improvements, because if you don't, you can get kind of lost in the middle of them, and you don't want to be in a position where you feel like you haven't done anything when really you've done a lot, because some days motivation is a little bit harder to come by than others. Question time. So you can ask me general questions about your test experience or anything adjacent. Do I think it is necessary, apart from doing and revising exercises, to learn all the formulas by heart? It's a good question. There are some that you will absolutely have to learn, as in you need to be able to recite them. There are also formulas, I think, that are a bit more intuitive, and you will have some tools available to you. So some things that come up a lot, it is absolutely, you will need to learn them by heart, and in many cases you will learn them against your will just through practice questions. But that is a great thing to notice. If you forget a formula and you're going through your mocks, then you might need a flashcard for that. But some are a little bit, you don't need to have them recitable. You just need to know how to reason through the problem. And then when the problem presents, you will be able to see the pieces and think, oh, this goes like this. Let's see. How much time do you recommend allocating to studying if you were working full time? I was working full time. I did about 15 to 20 hours a week. If you do, I would say if you do less than 10 or 15 hours a week, your progress might be like prohibitively slow. Like it might stretch out your prep so long that you're kind of forgetting things at the end. But about 15 hours, I think, is quick enough that you're able to kind of get through things. And other than that, it'll depend on your job. If you have a lot of downtime, you might be able to do 30 hours a week. But if you don't expect yourself to do that because it's not going to happen and now you're just stressed for no reason. I would start with 15 and then kind of see how you're feeling. Is it possible to increase by 130 points in a month? It really depends. Is it possible? Yes. It really depends on a few things. What is the 130 point range? Because the lower it is, the easier it's going to be. Like if you wanted to go from like 575 to 705, that's going to be different than if you wanted to go from like 475 to 605. And it's also going to depend on how much time you have to focus. Like if you're doing just nonstop GMAT prep, you will probably have a lot more time and energy to study and notice patterns and notice your weaknesses and work on them. And what kind of mistakes I think you're making, which goes in a little bit to like where is your range of scores, because if your problem is that you mostly tend to make careless mistakes, you tend to miss keywords, I think that's a lot easier to fix as a broad problem in a few weeks than if your problem is actually like 30 smaller problems and you have to go through and identify each one. Let's see. I should have ideally followed the study plan, but I have completed Quant first and I'm done with all chapter tests. Oh, so we have a TTP study plan that kind of mixes Quant and verbal. And for me, that's easier because for me, sometimes like I don't have the energy for one thing, but I have the energy for the other thing. So it's a study plan. You can follow it, but I wouldn't treat it as just unassailable gospel. If you have a Quant lesson today and you just cannot, and you want to switch to verbal, then there's a certain level where you should listen to yourself. But yes, if you do all Quant in a row, then it might be hard to do all verbal in a row because you probably like Quant more than verbal if you led with a bunch of Quant, in which case just try to mix things up as best you can to keep things interesting for yourself. Ideally, how many months should you take to complete all the chapters, and is it okay if we focus on just learning the concepts for the first 2 months and then actually jump into the actual questions? That is a very interesting question. So there are questions in the lessons, and I would definitely do those as you go because sometimes things as written seem one way, but when you try to apply them, it's a little bit different. And so it's good to do at least those. If you don't want to do all of the chapter tests at the end, then that's not the most common way, I think, to do it. But if that's how you feel, then that might help you. I would probably still try to do some of the chapter tests, like at least an easy and a medium, just to make sure you're kind of cementing how to interact with the material. And then if you wanted to put a pin in it and then try to come back later, I think it would be better cemented in your mind because reading things and applying things are just slightly different mental muscles. I am going to stop sharing that and come over here. Can I share the deck after the call? Yes, I believe I can. Let's see. Is it a mistake to not learn the methods to tackle questions if I know how to use logic to get the answer? No, it is not a mistake to reason through things on the GMAT, which is what you're talking about. That's how it's supposed to be done. Um, The reason that I recommend learning some methods is that there are things that are very intuitive for everyone to reason through, but they are not the same things for everyone. So if there are things that you can reason through and thinking about the minutia of every step just isn't helpful for you, then don't worry about it. As long as you're reasoning consistently, you understand what's going on, you're able to develop a method that you can apply with success over and over, then great, that's success. The methods are there for you for the topics that you are not having such success on. So you don't have to follow a script just because it's there, but it is there for things that are maybe not so intuitive for you or maybe don't play to your background so much. How long did the whole process take for you, and how long did I spend on practice questions? Did I spend more time learning the material or practicing? Did I only use target test prep? Okay, how long did it take for me? It was about 9 or 10 months. How long did I spend on practice questions? That's kind of a tricky. I would say overall I spent like 550 hours minus the time on my mock, so let's say like 600 hours. Um, And that was reading and practice questions. It was a lot of practice questions. I had an estimate, maybe like 400 hours of practice questions. As far as like on the calendar, how long did I spend doing the learning phase versus the mocks phase? I would say 8-ish months of learning, and then the last 5 or 6 weeks I did a mock every Saturday. And that worked well for me because I was working and I did not want to take like a 3-hour test after work. So I would do it on Saturday and then I would kind of review as much as I could throughout the week or until I felt like pretty good about the questions. And then the rest of the time I would just do TTP reviews. So basically just going back through lessons, reading the little bullet points and highlights just to kind of keep things fresh on my mind. Did I spend more time learning the material or practicing? I spent more time learning and doing chapter and tests than I spent on the mocks. And did I only use target test prep? Yeah, I only use target test prep and the mocks to get my score. It's a pretty thorough program. So I know that some people like to mix different things, but target test prep had plenty enough for me to do. I did not feel like I needed to supplement with more than mocks after that. What if 2 max 3 months is left and now the score is not what I need what to do? Um, so you have 2 max 3 months left. It kind of depends on where you're at and where you're trying to be. Um, like I said, if you have an error log, that would be what I would do. Go through your error log, look at what you can do to target your weaknesses and just really drill them. 2 months is quite a while. So if you've already got a good foundation for the test and you're really to the point of just like, hey, I need my score higher, where are my gaps? And you've gotten kind of like an overview of what it covers, then go back through, look through the questions that you've missed and try to see why you've missed them. Like what kind of traps are you prone to? Um, what kind of timing issues are you having, that sort of thing, and then just really try to focus on that with the occasional brush up on everything else to kind of keep it front of mind. But yeah, if you spend time looking through your questions, it will take some time. And as I mentioned, it's not the most fun, but if you spend time looking through them enough, you can usually see some patterns. Oh, I tend to do these 3 things. Various things are versions of these 3 things. It seems like I missed 20 questions, but really I missed like 3 types of questions. How can I not miss these 3 types of questions? And the more time you spend reviewing, the more you will see those patterns emerge. It's just when it's in a big pile like that, it feels so overwhelming. But if you get in there and chip away at it, it's honestly much easier once you can get it into manageable pieces. Let's see. How much time should verbal and DI take? It kind of depends student to student, but I would definitely plan for if you have just no practice in verbal at all and you have no practice in DI at all, I would probably plan for like 100 hours of studying just off the top of my head. If you have some foundations and you just need to hone your skills, maybe a little bit less, but I would plan at least for like 100 hours for both verbal and DI at best, and maybe a little bit more depending on how your strengths are. DI does build off of, or let me rephrase. DI questions are really quant questions and verbal questions, but in a different format. So there is a bit of adjustment going from quant and verbal to DI, but most of it is just the format switch. The topics are already there almost across the board. And once you can kind of see that connection, it's a little bit less intimidating. And then you're really just learning how to interact with the tables or understanding the concept of two-part analysis or reading graphs and that sort of thing, which may or may not take a little while depending on your experience reading graphs. Hi, when should I know when I'm ready to schedule my first test? I've been studying for 4 months now, study between 12 and 14 hours a week, and I'm 30% into the course. So that's kind of what I'm saying about you don't want to set your test deadline for as like a motivation. So I would wait to finish the test, or sorry, I would wait to finish the course if that's what you're trying to do, and then take a couple of mocks and see how you're doing. And if you can get within your score range on 2 mocks, then I would say you're probably pretty set to schedule your exam. I will also say, though, that for me, I had a lot of options when I scheduled my exam. I didn't really have to, like, there was multiple places very close to me that offered it. So it's not like I had to schedule it super far out. If that's not the case for you, if they only offer it once a month, the time of the week that you could go, then that might be a consideration. But if it's regularly available, and I would definitely check on that, and you can ostensibly do it like schedule it 2 days from now and take it, then I would absolutely wait to feel as confident as I was going to feel before I scheduled it, because it costs money and they will not refund you the money if it turns out that you want more time. How can we obtain a higher percentile score other than improving accuracy? Um, I would say that accuracy is the main thing. So timing is important because you want to finish the sections, but you don't get a bonus if like you finish early. It's all based on accuracy. So I guess you would improving accuracy is the main way that you're gonna get a higher percentile score, if that makes sense. Were TTP questions enough for the practice? They were good other than the mocks for me. There's quite a few. So I was fine with just the TTP questions. I want to book a backup test date before I give my first one. Is a 3-week gap good enough to make improvements in case I don't get my desired score? So, interesting. Do you have to book your backup in advance? If that makes you feel better, then obviously go for it. There is a certain level of psychology that goes into doing well. So if it makes you feel better to have that backup, then that could be worth it for you. But Otherwise, I would probably not try to do that and see if you can do just like book your second test when you're ready, because you don't want to book it at 3 weeks and then really need 3.5. And if you had had that extra 3 days, you would feel better, or it falls on even like a week that you wanted to do something else that you didn't know about yet. So if you would really like to book it in advance, though, I would probably try to book it pretty close to the last day just to give myself the extra time. How important do I think verbal is if time limited? That's a good idea. And I want a score of 600. Do you think it's a good idea to study almost exclusively quant and data insights because the improvement from quant practice is much faster than verbal? How important do I think verbal is? I think it's about a third of the score. If you're seeing a lot of improvement from quant, then awesome. That could be a sign that you will have to spend a bit more time with verbal to help balance it out. I have people reach out to me a lot and they're like, oh, I'm really great at this one. Like, this one's going great for me, but I just don't know about this one at all. And I think that it's really this thought that, oh, I should split things evenly. I should spend this much time on this, and I should spend the equivalent amount of time on this. But people have strengths. So if you're good at quant, then you can probably spend a little less time on quant and a little more time on verbal and try to see a similar improvement. But it also kind of depends on where are you at verbal wise and where do you want to be? Because if you're already pretty comfortable with your verbal score and you're enjoying quant more and you feel like you're getting better guidance from it, then in that case, you might as well focus on quant and just take the verbal score where it's at. If you're not happy with your verbal score, then you might plan to spend a little more time on that just to see if you can get some improvement, even if it's not as satisfying or fast, because some things will just be much slower and more frustrating. And that is the nature of having individual preference a little bit. How much time should one spend on DI as it's the last step, and impatience can be really difficult at times? Yeah, it is the last step, and you will want to be done, but it's really, I think a lot of the GMAT is sitting with discomfort, because you are going to have to do some things that are just not probably your favorite way to spend time. It covers a lot of topics. You're going to have your preferences. So yes, when you get to DI, I can totally relate to feeling like, oh, I can't wait to be done with this. Like, I'm so close. But try to still do a good job. On the other hand, know your limits. And if you have done everything you can for DI, even if it's far less than you did for the other two topics, DI does really just reframe those similar concepts. So it probably will take less time. And if you feel like, hey, this is how good I think I'm going to be here, then listen to yourself. But if you feel like you could give more, you just don't want to, then you might try to push yourself a little bit, and you might be able to get past that initial reticence and into, oh, hey, like, this is worth spending a little bit of time on. Did I take the official months for practice? Any other full-length practices, resources you would recommend? I took all 6 months for practice. Yes, full-length practice resources that I would recommend. One thing that can be helpful is that the mocks are random. So you get like a random 20 questions for your section, depending on the section. But it could be very heavily weighted towards one thing in a way that the average test would not be. It's totally random. Different websites, TTP has one, but I think there are some others. offer diagnostic mocks, so they are not random. They're more designed to give you questions from a variety of subjects, and so those can be helpful just to get a more balanced review to see where your weaknesses are, because you don't want to have like just as a matter of chance you had no probability questions and you're like, great, don't need to cover that, and then you actually did need to cover it. And the diagnostics, because they're kind of hand-picked questions, can be really helpful, and they're free. So if you've got the energy to do extra practice tests, I would not think that that was a bad way to spend your time. Do an official mock just to get a feel for the test, because part of it is, oh, I want to see what's on the test, but part of it is just the experience of the test itself, the interface, that sort of thing. And then you can also supplement that with one of these diagnostics from the test prep companies. And that way you can get a more balanced review as far as what topics you might come into contact with and where you might need to focus more energy. Did I only take the test once? Yes. Is it very important to give your practice tests in a completely new environment, or home is fine with a table and chair? Yeah, I just did mine at home. And honestly, I took my test at a test center, and when I was practicing my practice test, I was doing it at my house, which I did not have an office in at the time. And so I was just like doing it on my coffee table, and it was not a great setup. And so I think one thing that kind of worked in my favor was going into the practice test room was obviously not my house, so it was a little bit different, but it was so much more ergonomically set up that I wasn't like hunched over the coffee table for 3 hours, and I think that that really helped me do better. So I would just do your practice tests at your house if you're fine with that, because you already have your house. So that's one less barrier to get your practice test done. And in my case, it kind of had a backup effect of when I got to the test center, I was like, this is way better, like an actual chair, a table that isn't 3 inches above the chair. I tend to take so much time to answer, and I find myself not finishing the section. Will the unanswered questions affect my score more or less to wrong answers? More. Always answer every question. I feel like that's the biggest pacing thing, is if you get a question wrong, it will hit you way less hard than if you leave a question blank. I think it knocks off like a full 3 points. You get no consideration if you leave a question blank. So you are better, if you see you have a minute left and you have 3 questions, you are better off just going in and putting something into all 3, even if you don't even read them, than you are leaving anything blank. That is a very important thing to know about the GMAT. They will penalize you if you leave things blank. Hi, can you please share some pointers on hard questions of verbal? I'm not able to get the accuracy of 70%, mostly between 50 and 60. Okay. Able to get the required accuracy in medium and easy questions, and is 60% good for verbal hard questions of TTP as that of Quant, where 60 is okay for hard questions. So 50 to 60 isn't crazy low for the hard verbal questions. The TTP hard verbal questions are pretty hard. In my experience, they were a bit harder than basically anything I saw on the GMAT. I think the main thing is when you're doing the hard questions, you want to try to understand what's going on with them. So even if you take the test once and you're getting a score of like 50% on the hard and the threshold is 70, if you are going through and reading them and you're like, oh, I see what's happening, then I still think that's pretty good. It's great to add to spaced repetition, but the TTP hard verbal questions are super hard, and especially like a bunch in a row like that. I have the same feeling about Quant, that the TTP hard Quant tests are like 15 questions long a lot of the times, and you won't get 15 hard questions on the GMAT. Like they won't even give you that many. So if you can get through those hard Quant tests, you are really setting yourself up, because they will cap you out at like 8 or 10 hard questions. And then it doesn't matter if you got them all right or not. They're not giving you any more because of timing reasons. And so if you're going through and the hard verbal questions, you're not quite hitting the accuracy, but like you're going back and you're really trying to understand what's going on and you're doing your review, then honestly, that's fine. The other thing about the verbal questions is there's usually a lot less. So the difference between hitting the threshold and not could be like one question. And so it's not the same as when there's like 15 or 20 questions. It would be a more indicative score. But yeah, if you get like 2 right and 2 wrong, it could just be that those 2 questions threw you. One thing I would really look at with the TTP verbal questions as well is like how the accuracy for other students is. So it'll tell you like 20% of people picked C, 23% of people picked E. And anything where the accuracy is less than like 30% is just very, very hard. I call those challenges, and you're just not very likely to run into something like that on the GMAT. But if you can go ahead, get familiar with them, and then see how the reasoning works, then if your questions on the GMAT are easier, well, that's a good problem to have. How to know the best order to take the exams. So earlier I mentioned you want to take notes about how you're doing on your timing and everything, but you want to take notes on your energy too. And I think that that is your biggest indicator as far as how to pick your order. Because if you love one thing and you hate another thing, and the third thing you're like meh on, but you know that you were always just so ready for this to be over after an hour, then you do not want to be in the middle of the part of the exam that you hate in that hour because it's going to make it even worse. So there are, I guess, 6 ways that you can order your sections, and there are 6 mocks, and I would just recommend trying a good mix and seeing, hey, when I start with verbal, I feel pretty good, and then I can go into whatever. Or when I start with quant, that really boosts my confidence. It helps me go into verbal. I did DI, then quant, then verbal, and that worked pretty well for me. I was tending to leave verbal for last because that was my strongest section, and it's the least like physical section to me, like way less doing formulas. My notes were a lot shorter, that sort of thing. And so kind of being not so reliant on handwriting as much stuff for verbal in my case made that an easier thing to do when I was already 2 hours into the test and pretty tired. But yeah, I would play with the order and kind of see how your energy flows, because capitalizing on that can make a pretty big point difference. And really, it depends on you in particular, what's going to work best for you. So see what works best for you and then try to at least optimize that. And that is one less thing to worry about. And it could easily be the difference of like 40, 50 points. You said that when you prep for verbal, it felt like a cheat to look at the answer choices out of the vast array of possibilities you got used to. So did you also presume the answer choices while making notes of the passage? Also, did you make notes for both CR and RC? So there's kind of this notion of like you shouldn't pre-think answers, and I think that it gets confusing because what you shouldn't pre-think is the definitive answer that you want to see. And then when it's not there, you can't see the perfectly fine answer that is there because it doesn't match your prediction. When I say, like, when I prep for verbal, I would look at the passage and then consider the possibilities, especially practicing untimed. Here are all the holes in this argument. Like, here is all the ways that it could go wrong. That really helped me see how flawed the arguments are. And that made it way easier for me to see, like, oh, this one does fit here. Or if I looked at it and I was like, it's got to be this basically. And then I looked at the answer choices and that wasn't a choice and it was something else. Oh, well, actually, like this argument's even weaker than I thought because I thought the main weakness was X, but really it was Z. So it does help to engage with the material in that way, to really be reading the arguments with a lot of skepticism and seeing where they're weak. And then as I got kind of closer to the end of verbal and I didn't have infinity time to spend on it, I would just look at the answers more quickly, like read through quick notes and then look at the answers. And I feel like that it was almost like, oh, I was training with a weighted vest and now I don't have to do this thing where I stare at this argument for 10 minutes and like really think about all the problems with it. I just have to like look at the potential list of problems or look at the potential list of addressed problems and that's ta-da. And so that was really helpful for me to just go and be very inquisitive. And then at the end, now I don't have to do that step of being so inquisitive. I just have to rely on the answer choices that are given and it's a lot easier. Also, did I make notes for both critical reasoning and reading comprehension? Yes, I did make some notes for critical reasoning and reading comprehension. One thing that I do recommend for notes is people like to ask me how I do my notes, and the truth is, like, my notes would be useless to you. You would not even, it doesn't look like English, like you would not be able to parse them because I took so many notes for so long that it's just like an unhinged shorthand. So what I recommend when people aren't sure how to take notes is you should take notes to the point where you develop the shorthand that you can consistently read. And at that point, there's a good chance it won't make sense to anybody else. But yes, I would take notes for both critical reasoning and reading comprehension, pretty shorthand as quickly as I could, just to have something to write, which helps me process information in front of me a little more interactively, and also just to have like a rough map of what is going on in the passage, point 1, point 2, point 3. That's easier for me to review quickly than going back through and rereading the whole thing. Can we see the recording? Oh, like, will the video be available? Yes. Awesome. Did I miss anyone's question? There was quite a few. Or if you didn't know if you would have time, well, you do. You're welcome to drop one in. Any final test day tips? Look, I think that you really have to prep for this test, but the biggest thing I can tell you is relax before you take it. Like, if you can afford to take a couple of days of no studying and just try to get plenty of sleep, plan things ahead, because when I say like your mood could be the difference plus or minus 40 points, there is really something to that. Like, how well you sleep could be the difference. Like, how you're feeling, like how confident you are. It can all add up to putting you in the frame of mind of like, I am about to just murder this test, or like, "Oh, I really hope I do well." Like, you want to set yourself up to be as confident as you can be, and whatever that takes. For me, it's plenty of sleep and hydrating, but for you, it may be something else. Whatever that takes, set yourself up to be like your A game when it comes to the test, because when you're down to your last 2 days, there is nothing you're learning that's going to make as much difference as just like feeling good when you go in there. So that is my final test day tip. Study all you can, but also give yourself some space before the exam to unwind a little bit. Do you know if there is any solution or exception for left-handed people in taking the test at a test center? When I write on the scratch paper with a pen, I always end up smudging everything. Oh, buddy. So they should. I'm trying to think. That's so annoying. So mine was, it was a notebook that opened at the top, which I would hope would be like a little bit better. And the desk wasn't like, it wasn't right centric. It was just like a regular computer cubicle. But I would definitely check with your test center and be like, hey, I'm a lefty. Do you have anything that might help with that? Or if you have things that you know work for you, you might run that by them. Because I can't remember for sure any specific like right-handed things. And I've taken a lot of tests at left-handed desks, so it is something that I look at. But I can't remember specifically any catered to right-handed things, but it would not hurt to check with your test center. For all I know, they're all the same, but you should check for the one that you're going to, ideally. Yes, the recording will be available. I struggle a lot with timing on DI in my mocks. Any insight on how can I tell if this is a content issue or a time management issue? Like, should I be reviewing more content or practicing more questions? What you're probably doing is you're doing too much in your visuals, is my guess. If people spend too much time on DI, it's almost always that. So you need to tone down a little bit what you're getting into with the visuals before you look at the question. I usually recommend like headlines only. So if it's a graph, you want to look at your axis labels, you want to look at the title, basically that's it. Look at your question, go back and find what you need. You want to get like the roughest map of the information, or MSR similarly. You want to look at the headlines of each tab and then you want to glance at them, and if they're like 2 sentences long, just read them. But if it's a lot of information, no, just look at your headlines for your tabs, and if there are graphs, any labels, so that when you read the question, you can be like, oh, tab 2, graph 2. If you're doing any more than that, then you're probably getting bogged down a little bit too much in details that don't matter. So practice some more questions and try to get like, see where your limit is for like the least amount of information you need to read before you read the question to get a layout of where the information is, and then try to continue with that. But it'll vary a little bit, obviously graph to graph. Some are shorter and simpler and some are longer. And seeing more will help you kind of feel out like, oh, that's my limit. Now I know the rough idea, moving on to my questions. Do you think 3 months of studying with a full-time job is a reasonable amount of time before taking the test? I'm trying to gauge if I would be able to apply for later application rounds for 2026 programs. It depends on where you're starting, and it depends on like what your goal score is. What I would do is, I see what you're saying. What I would do is just try to start studying and see what you have the mental energy for, and do that much. And if you can get into the late deadlines for 2026, I don't think 3 months is crazy low for a lot of people, but for me, for instance, I did like everything I could. Like I went to TTP and I was like, I don't have a score. I want to see every lesson. That's how I did it. That might be kind of hard to do in 3 months, but if you kind of have a baseline score or you have some experience and there's some stuff that you're fine skimming over, then, which I think is often the case for people, then 3 months might be plenty. But what I would do is just start studying, see the progress that you're able to make. And then if you make your 2026, awesome. If you don't make it till 2027, but you've got a way better score, then also awesome. And that is also a consideration as far as like, if you want to try to take the test in 3 months, wherever you're at and you're studying, but you end up getting the score that you need, cool, then proceed from there. And if you don't end up getting the score that you need, then having that like open-minded flexibility is really helpful. Like I said, I ended up applying, I ended up having a lot of time for applications because I delayed my application a whole year because studying took longer than I thought it would, and it worked out fine for me. So depending on your situation, that might be the same for you. All right. Any other questions? Okay, I'm glad it was helpful. That's what I'm going for. Um, if you have any other questions, I'm going to drop my email in here and you can reach out to me. And then the videos are usually like they take a couple of days to process. So it should be posted in a couple of days. If you want to reach out to me, I can send you a link at that point. Is there anything I would do differently if I was to do it again? I will say it really worked out for me. And so, as much as I love to obsess about past failings, it really worked out in my favor. So, if you had asked me before I took my test, hey, is there anything you would do differently? Like, for sure, I would have said some things. But since it worked out, I guess it's all part of the journey. I will say the one thing I did, which won't be a problem for you, lucky you, is I did initially start prepping for the old GMAT, and then it went away, and I didn't realize for a while. And so I did a full like 2 weeks of prep on non-coordinate geometry, like Geometry Classic, which they used to have, and a bunch of stuff on sentence correction that I did not need. So I don't recommend doing that because you do not need it. But as far as do I regret it now? No, it actually worked out great for me. I hope that it's the same for all of you. I really hope that even if day to day you're just like, I hate this so much and I do not want to do it today, but I'm going to make myself, that later you will forget how frustrating it is and you will just be like, wow, I really slayed. Any other questions? All right. If Yeah, sure. Feel free to reach out to me. People do with assorted questions. So if you're confused about an example, hit me up. If you finally thought of the thing that you wanted to ask, but you couldn't quite figure out how to phrase it, hit me up on that. Like, that is what the email is for. I will see what I can do to help you. I love to hear from students. Very relatable problems in a lot of cases, so I will do anything I can to help you out. All right, awesome. I guess we will wrap this up. Thank you all so much for being here. And if you want to take my class, it is starting in a couple of weeks, and we can hang out there for 40 hours of live instruction. If you got your question answered here, that's fabulous. I love that for you. If you think of something else later, please reach out to me. Otherwise, good luck on your studies. I know that it can be challenging sometimes, but it can also be very rewarding, so hang in there. Thank you all.